Good morning. Today is Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. 6 cases on the agenda. The first case, and we also have 6 board members present for a quorum. The first case is RPC 310250001 at 2400 South Glebe Road. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, members of DREA, good morning. 2400 South Glebe Road. This is the Allister Arlington Ridge Apartments located at Glebe and 395. This building was built in 1965 and has 227 units. Physical vacancy as of the date of value was 12%, and as of today, it's 12.8%. If you'd be so kind as to direct your attention to page 39 of the board pack, you will see the taxpayer's grounds for appeal, the 4-year operating history at the property, and the current assessment. I want to note that 2019 is only a partial year since this property did sell in 2019. You'll note that the second ground listed is vacancy and collection loss at the property. Looking at the 3-year history of where we have full years, again, 2019 is a partial year, we see that vacancy and collection loss has averaged over 11%. There are 2 reasons for this high rate. First, the property typically records high turnover. Last year, the property saw 141 units turnover. This is, again, out of 227 total units. This means that last year alone, 62% of the total units at the property turned over in 2022. Now, this is, I do have some familiarity with this property. We did inspect it this year, but additionally, my wife used to live there a few years back. This property, it's not a luxury building. It's not situated in Ballston or Courthouse, Clarendon. The main appeal is its convenience. The proximity to 395 is why people choose this building. So typically, that's a lot of the tenants are people who have to commute to work in DC, and they may be moving to the area from outside of Northern Virginia and pick this property based on its location. It's easy to get in. Of course, with remote work and work from home policies, there's less demand for this space, which the primary driver is its location. So turnover at the property again was 62% in 2022, which of course increases both vacancy and collection loss and the operating expenses due to turnover costs. Secondly, the property has been renovating units over the past few years. They've been painting the kitchen cabinets, adding new floors and new appliances. The property renovated approximately 104 units in 2022. Now we're able to convert this to see what effect this had on the vacancy loss. If we drill down on these renovations, we can see what amount they contributed in 2022. So 104 units were renovated. If we assume each renovation took, say, 1 month, which they would not take longer than a month. That's the high end to complete. That means that an average of 8.7 units were offline for the entire year, which translates to 3.8% of the total. So 3.8% is the max vacancy and collection loss that could be attributable to renovations for 2022. Of course, 2022 actual vacancy and collection loss, as you can see, was 11.7%. So if we take out this max vacancy and collection loss due to renovations of 3.8%, that still leaves overall vacancy and collection loss at 8% for the year. Now, these renovations, as I mentioned, were just replacing floors, appliances, and painting cabinets. It likely did not take a full month to turn over each renovation. And if we assume a lesser time frame, of course, that lowers the vacancy and collection loss related to renovations. So for instance, if we assume only 2 weeks to turn over each renovated apartment, then it means the overall effect on vacancy and collection loss for the year was less than 2%. So even assuming a month to renovate each unit, we have vacancy and collection loss at 8% in 2022. This could possibly be higher if we assume renovations took 2 weeks. This is in line with what the 2022 assessment used for vacancy and collection loss. Last year, the assessment assigned 8% for vacancy and collection loss. Again, this property actually did operate at that rate in 2022. The 2023 assessment drops the vacancy and collection loss rate to only 6%. Next, so the assessment understates vacancy and collection loss required at the property. And again, that's due to the high turnover nature of this property. It's Again, located right off of 395, and with fewer people commuting into the city, it loses a lot of its appeal. Next, looking at the 3-year history on page 39 of the board pack, we see that operating expenses have increased over the past 3 years and have averaged 1.63 million over this 3-year period. These increases are primarily due to inflation running at record rates over the past few years, turnover again at 62% in 2022, and the age of the building. This building was built in 1965. Finally, the assessment understates the cap rate for this property. This property has again had high vacancy, high turnover, and increasing operating expenses. No potential purchaser as of the date of value would look at this property knowing the vacancy and turnover numbers recorded for 2022 and value it at exactly the same cap rate they used in 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Add to the vacancy and collection issues the fact that interest rates increased by 425 basis points over the course of 2022. These rate increases began in March of last year. It's simply not logical that an investor would impute the exact same required rate of return on this property as it has for each of the past 5 years and at the lowest rate of any of the past 15 years. As such, we respectfully request the board reduce the assessment as set forth in the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roskin for the county, please.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Jordan. As Mr. Harmon mentioned, we went out and inspected this property this year in July. And we were able to walk the property with the property manager. After talking to her, she stated that there were renovations done to the common areas, unit updates with new kitchen bath. There was, like you mentioned, there's some cabinetry that was repainted or updated when necessary. Appliances were updated, floors, paint. They renovated the pool in 2019 and pretty much finished, but a lot of these updates were finished in 2022, most of them. The other major project that they did was washer and dryer installations. So about roughly 50% of those were started in 2022, and the remainder are occurring, well, according to the property manager, they should finish now, the other. But we're looking at the first half of the 50%, you know, because of January 1, those updates. So this leads to why I increased in the test column, I increased the effective age by 10 years. It's pretty modest. Basically, I'm still looking at this property as it's 48 years old. That's increasing it by 10. Because the original age is 1965, and I increased it to 1975. So basically, the big discrepancies that we have here is the vacancy. So we took that in my test column. I took that into consideration. Now, I was not provided a rent roll. If you read the email correspondence, I actually requested the email several times. I even requested it when we were on site. It did not give it to me. They said that I could use the unit matrix, which was attached to the 2022 INE. And so I looked at the unit matrix. Those numbers, those average rent numbers that they provided are much higher than what I used in the test. So I reduced the rent, okay, to account for the excess vacancy. And we believe that that excess vacancy, the high turnovers, is well, the maintenance or renovations that they were doing in the last couple of years. I tried to demonstrate that a little bit in the grid on the summary page below. You can see for common area repairs, decorating, plumbing repairs, and capital improvements. I kind of broke those out year after year, so you can take a look at that. So that actually leads into the expenses. So the expenses are exceptionally high for the year 2022. And so when you look at the little grid below this, the little grid at the bottom, we figured that roughly 230,000 in the common areas is probably attributed to capital expenses, capital improvements. Like I said, again, I did ask that in an email about that, and it was, they never responded. And we also estimate that approximately 100,000 in the decorating is attributed to these renovations. So you add that up, that's about 330,000 that we think the expenses are being, they're not typical maintenance. When you subtract that 330,000 from the 2022, their NOI is within $5,000 of our NOI for the January 1. The other thing I'd like to remind you is that, or add, is that 2019, yes, that's a peak year, but 2019, this property sold for $55 million. The apartments have not done terribly at all during COVID. I mean, they survived. For some reason, Arlington rents are still going up. And additional assessment is at $51,996,000. I'm open for questions.
I'd like to, can I just add something? I just want to go back again to the categories of renovations for effective age changes. Again, this does fall in line with our renovations to common areas where that would include lobbies or conference rooms, bathrooms, kitchens, and things of that nature. This property was built in 1965. Again, we used a very conservative 10-year increase for this property to recognize all of the renovations that occurred prior to January 1, 2023. Additionally, there were questions that were asked in the email that Lori has provided in the packet. If you would turn to that email, it specifically asks questions regarding providing the original rent roll. Again, that was not provided. Providing a detailed report of the vacancy for the operating year 2022 and the number of units that were offline during that renovation. We're just hearing that information today from Mr. Harmon. Some of these emails are sometimes go unresponded to, and so therefore we are doing the best we can to value the properties given the information that we are provided. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Go to questions from board members. I mean, I'll start, Mr. Herman. Why wasn't the information provided when it was requested?
So this all could have been discussed at a departmental hearing had one been held. One was not. We requested one.
Okay, all right, I'm going to cut you off there.
We did reach out to the
Excuse me.
client for this
Hold on.
information.
Hold on.
Just
Mr. Herman, hold on.
Yep.
We get that you didn't get departmental hearings. So you said that on other cases. My question is, why didn't you provide the information? You know,
So what?
just like any other appellant would provide, doesn't
Madam
need a
Chairwoman,
departmental hearing.
I understand the question. Thank you. Madam Chairwoman, what we've run into repeatedly when we receive these questions, we reach out to the owner, ask the questions. We receive a confirmation from Drea within the week of being asked these questions. And I'm not sure exactly when we received confirmation on this property, but typically within 5 business days of being asked, we're hit with the confirmation. We don't always have a response within 5 business days. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks to hear back from the client. I heard back this week from the owner on this. So, you know, they're expecting a quick turnaround on these questions, and it's not always
Okay,
reasonable.
all right, thank you. Other questions? No, Ms. Roskin, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Certainly. Excuse me. So once again, I increased in the test column, I increased the cap rate, or decreased, excuse me. I increased the effective age modestly by 10 years. Once again, I'm looking at this property as if it was 48% still. And based on the little grid at the bottom where I provided a little breakdown on the certain expenses, we believe that the 2022 INE is overstated, or it's mixing renovation costs in those operating expenses by about roughly 330,000. And so once again, if you subtract that 333,000 that's being reported for expenses in the 2022 column, it'll bring their NOI within $5,000 of our original assessment. So I'm just requesting the value of the original assessment at $51,995,000.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So this property again had 141 units turnover last year. That's because its primary appeal is its proximity to I-395. When my wife lived there, that's why she chose this location. Other tenants did the same. People from out of the area come in, they commute into DC and then back. Now that work from home has taken over, it's lost one of its main drivers for appeal. Even if we smooth vacancy and collection loss for renovations and approximate 1 month per renovation, vacancy and collection loss for 2022 is still 8%. Now, as to their expense contention, CapEx is reported separately. You can see they reported $1.8 million in CapEx for 2022. So they're not reporting renovation cost in operating expenses. If we look at the operating expense rate, it's been steady for the past 3 years. 2020, 29%, 2021, 34%, 2022, 36%. These increases are in line with what's to be expected from inflation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, it's just among the board members. Mr. Maskin.
Couple of observations to share. One, excuse me, on operating expenses. It seems that the department did what it often does and kind of averages out over a number of years, especially starting with 2019, how much lower it is than 2022 reporting. And the trend is up, the average is up, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable with lowering in the test, the rents to offset some of the unusual turnover. I thought a lot about the total vacancy allowance in between rows 10 and 11. Should it be 6% or 8%? Because they seem to have an average, an experience of over the guideline. So I kind of could go either way and make a case for either. And finally, for the cap rate, the effective age has never changed in 1965. I mean, nobody could possibly believe that nothing was improved in this thing in whatever it is, 55 years, 58 years. On the other hand, B, this is January 1st, 2023, and the department thought at the time that nothing had ever changed. And clearly that's wrong, and clearly it ought to be shown next January 1st, 2024. But I don't believe that the cap rate, based on information gleaned by the department with its limited resources after the data evaluation, ought to factor in. So I think it ought to stay at the 5.8 rate for cap. So I would feel comfortable taking the test, but applying a 5.8 cap. Also, I guess I should have led with this. Almost 9% increase 1 year over another in a very, very stabilized building. Although it is now spending money to improve itself in real time, just seemed excessive, but I'm aiming therefore the remedy to that, to the maintaining the cap rate for this 1 year.
Okay, just to address both of your points. If you take the test and you increase the vacancy to 8% with a 5.7% cap rate, you come in at 51,989, which is slightly higher, very slightly higher than the original.
Right.
If you take the original column or not the original, but the test column, cap it at 5.8, you come in at 52,768, which is still higher than the original. So your response then is you're with the original assessment. It's a lower amount than what you just argued.
You know, I did all that math you just said, I did it all, but then didn't look over 2 columns.
Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers are the numbers. I'm not trying to.
It's the beauty of the numbers. Mr. Yates.
Well, and you gave a great list of items.
Yep.
And in response to the one on operating expenses, as we heard the other day, they were weighting things to the higher increase of cost today, renovation costs versus what things were a couple of years ago, just the increasing construction costs. To take an average of expenses, I think is a little off. I think there needs to be a weighting to that. A little
These
bit.
days.
Yes, you know, just to take something that's got a high and a low and hit the middle when clearly the backside of that's a little heavier. I think the weighting should be, you know, the expenses should be moved a little that direction. And you know, the original at 33%, yeah, I understand that, but I'm looking at 22 at 41%. Now, I understand what she's saying too about there may be some things in there that wouldn't be, but I still think that 33 might be low.
We got to go by dollars, not percent.
Right.
Well, right, and I'm looking at some of the dollar, you're looking at the dollars.
Dollars is still low according to your.
Yeah, totally. That's the one area I saw there is a very reasonable adjustment. What's the other one? Oh, and I'm not sure, and you guys may have a better feel for this. On the vacancy, when you're renovating lots of units in a building, and we've seen a couple of these buildings do this. And I know, honestly, my daughters has both experienced it, where they've moved them at the end of their lease from one unit to another.
Yeah, yes.
That's a turnover. That's a vacancy and a new turnover unit. Was it really a turnover, or did they go from the first floor to the second floor kind of thing? That's where I'm not sure that turnover is quite as accurate in that either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a little nervous about going up over 3 million on both of the counties NOI, on the test and the original assessment, just because of when I do a 3-year average, it's like 2.757. And so that's a pretty big jump. I know they did 3 million in 2020, but that's an odd year because it was sold in 19. So you kind of get a transition where the numbers might not be exactly right because you got one group doing the books one year, and then all of a sudden you have a new property manager coming in. Some expenses shift to the year before, the year after, or whatever. So I mean, if I looked at the 3-year average and try to kind of blend through that, I'm at 2,757 on NOI. The appellant's got 2,937 as their NOI. So I was kind of thinking we go with the appellant's number and just use the cap rate from the 1975 effective age. And that's just a slight reduction. It's 51,539.
That was one of the calculations I did.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. I'm at 51,539, 596, 51,553, 534, 51, 033, 421. Just coming up with different ideas. That's one of the things I did, Greg. Another thing I did is I took the operating year and I deducted, I guess, vacancy, rent loss, and concessions, and then used a different figure and then capped that at 51,033,421. So I don't know. I think a very slight decrease is in order.
Well, I did something a little simpler, I guess. Given the benefit of the doubt that the expenses are high, 235,000 that Roskin said, we take that off. I didn't just take that amount, just and what I did is I increased expenses on the test at 35, and it comes to 1,598,000. It's pretty much taken to 235 off. Capping it at 5.8, it's 51,193,400. I thought that was more reasonable than dealing with the vacancy and all that stuff.
If simpler is better.
Yeah,
Rather than just
appreciate
take a
that.
number from one column to the other.
That's,
So you're not changing the cap rate?
I did not do that.
5.8. Yes.
You did not change that.
I think
From the
that's
test,
fair.
it's 5.7.
Right, so you're not changing it from the original assessment.
No, I'm not changing. That's what the guidelines.
I think you've got.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll move that we reduce the assessment to 51,193,400 based on increasing the expenses on the test of 35% and cap rate to 5.8.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Hoffman, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Carries. Okay, the assessment is reduced to 51,193,400 based on the original assessment, increasing expenses to 35% and the original cap rate at 5.8.
Can I repeat what you just said? So you're taking column D, increasing the expenses to 35%, correct? Or using the original, did I understand that right?
Yes, you did.
On the column F,
Did that again?
column F, the test.
Okay.
So you did it off the test.
So that's-
Yeah,
Oh, you did it off the test, okay, so you used test column.
So the test column, increasing expenses to 35%, putting the cap rate back to 5.8%.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, the second case, RPC 170020004 at 1655 Fort Meyer Drive. And the appellant asked to withdraw this on the 14th. The case, Mr. Harmon?
I'm sorry, you said 1655 North Fort Meyer?
Yes.
Eileen, can you chime in? I thought we were going to hear this one. Let me double check.
Oh, I didn't review that. I didn't even print it because I thought it was gone.
We asked to withdraw a different case. We asked to withdraw case
1812.
332, which is 1812 Fort Meyer.
1812 North Moore.
Northmore, correct.
yeah, that's.
Okay, well, that's not what we got in the email, so nobody's prepared to discuss this case, so this
Yeah.
case is gonna have to get moved to.
I'm prepared if Jordan's prepared.
No, the board is not
Oh,
prepared. We haven't
I get
looked at it. Unfortunately. Okay, so RPC 170020004, you do want to hear this case.
Yes,
All right, so can
1655
you
Fort Myers.
Reschedule that.
Madam Chairman, these two cases have the same number. 332.
No, 332 and
Oh, I see.
322.
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
So just to be clear then, the sixth case on the agenda, RPC 160370004 at 1812 North Moore Street. That's the case that you want to withdraw.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, is there any objection? I assume, Mr. Peralta, you don't have an objection?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay,
I just want to make sure the board knows, I just checked the email and the email is correct, that we asked to withdraw case 332.
Okay, so I will move to accept the withdrawal on RPC 160370004. Do I have a second?
second.
Okay, Mr. Lawson, for a second, all in favor? Aye, opposed? Okay. That case has been withdrawn. Okay, next up on the agenda then is RPC 160330004 at 1515 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes. Tell us about that property.
Yes, thank you. So 1515 Wilson Boulevard, this is a 126,000 square foot office building. It's located next to the Safeway in Roslyn and across the street from the Target. It was built in 1970. Vacancy at the property increased from under 2% on January 1, 2022 to over 8% on January 1 of this year. Despite this increase in vacancy, the assessment increased year over year. The DREA test provides a value that is an even greater increase than the assessment. A departmental hearing was again requested and denied. Looking at the board pack, I'll again request that you direct your attention to the appellant's pro forma. This is on page 29 of the appeal. Now, here I want to walk you through how we arrived at each of our figures on that stabilized potential column to the right. Starting at the top, the property has 104,000 square feet of leased office space. This space is leased at a weighted average rental rate of $41.38 per square foot. From this rate, we deducted the uniform market concessions rate of 10% to arrive at a lease office rate of $37.24 per square foot. Now, neither the assessment nor the test makes a deduction for concessions, and as a result, the assessment treats this property differently from other properties in the county, which of course is neither uniform nor equalized. If we take the DREA's own conclusion of average leased office space, which is noted in comment 1 as being $40.85 per square foot, and then we deduct the uniform 10% concessions, we get to a leased office per square foot average of $36.77. Not the $40 the assessment imputes, not the $39.50 the test imputes, but $36.77. You'll note that the appellant's average office rate of $37.24 is higher than what the government's after concession rate of $36.77 would be. This is because we included 2 retail tenants as office space. This was simply a reporting oversight. But even still, it's still much lower than what the assessment imputes. Next, for the 8,000 square feet of vacant office space, we imputed the leased office rate of $37.24 per square foot. For the retail income, we imputed that space at $59.13 per square foot. This drops to $53.42 if all the retail tenants are included on this line and not the 2 that are included as office. Now, looking at the pass-through and parking income next, you'll see that we imputed the 2022 actual received, consistent with how other properties are assessed in the county. We impute the guideline vacancy rate of 10%, then use the assessment's operating expenses of $1.577 million. You'll notice on the DREA test that the operating expenses were decreased by over $200,000 from the initial assessment so that the expenses would match the 2022 actual operating expenses. This is essentially asserting that 2023 operating expenses will be exactly the same as those in 2022. This despite inflation running at 6.5% over the first 3 quarters of 2022 and inflation known to be continuing into 2023. They're essentially stating that January 2023 expenses will be exactly the same as January 2022 expenses. February 2023 expenses will be exactly the same as February 2022 expenses, and so on. Finally, the cap rate we imputed is the 2022 guideline rate plus 200 basis points to account for the systemic risk inherent in the office market due to both the institutionalization of work from home policies, which has crushed demand for office space, and due to the increased cost of capital and tighter lending requirements related to the Federal Reserve raising interest rates by 425 basis points, which began in March of 2022. Now we're now in year 4 after COVID hit and sent everyone home. Return to office still hasn't happened. As of the end of last year, offices were about 45% utilized in the DC region. 2020, we were told that in 2020 was an aberration that would go away once vaccines came out. Everybody would come back to the office. Vaccines came out in December of 2020, and large portions of the population were vaccinated in 2021, but there is still no return to office. Then we heard that companies were serious about returning to the office in 2022, and that Labor Day was the commuters' D-Day. Still no return to office that comes close to pre-pandemic levels. Again, as of the end of 2022, office occupancy in this region was still at about 45%. We've heard from DREA's own agents that COVID is over, the pandemic is over, yet we are still not seeing a return to work. This is reflected in the negative net absorption the county has experienced over the past 3 years, the increase in sublet space available, and the new leases that are for smaller footprints. It's time to assess the office market with the appropriate risk adjustment for work from home policies. The cap rate was also pummeled by interest rate increases throughout 2022. Increased interest rates increased the cost of capital, as we have heard from industry experts. Over the 15 years prior to 2022, interest rates on 10-year T-bills fluctuated by an average of only 75 basis points either up or down. In 2022, the 10-year T-bill increased by 236 basis points. This is over 3 times the historical rate. This will have an effect on the market. In addition to the cost of capital increasing, lending requirements have also changed. Where loan-to-value ratios may have been around 70% before, now they're much lower if a loan can even be approved for risky office properties. This requires an investor to risk a higher proportion of their own money, which of course requires a higher overall return. Now, there was a recent sale in the county, 4601 Fairfax Drive. This occurred at the end of August. This property was 62% leased at the time of sale. It had GSA as the main tenant. This property sold for $104 per square foot. The stabilized potential column value is $231 per square foot. This is well above this recent sale. Now, I want to address finally a discrepancy between the appraiser comments on page 3 of the appeal and appraiser comments on the test page of the appeal. First, as of the date of value, the property had over 10,000 square feet vacant. The appraiser comments state only 2,000 square feet were vacant, but then if you look at the analysis, you see that the appraiser states over 10,000 square feet were actually vacant. This matches the vacancy rate imputed on both the assessment and the test column on page 4 of the appeal. Next, the appraiser comments state that the 2022 INE shows new leases average $42.50 per square foot. The 2022 INE rent roll begins on page 35 of the appeal. Here you can see that there were no new leases in 2022. So assuming DREA is referring to 2021 leases when they state that new leases were at $42.50, we can look to these leases and see that 2021 new leases were at a weighted average rate of only $39.35 per square foot before concessions, not the $42.50 that the comments state. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. When the county originally assessed this property, we did take a look at the prior review in 2022. And based on that, we looked at the expenses in particular. And the appellant at the time, I noted in column G that they reported 13 would be the projected expenses for this property. Although in 2021, the owner only reported $10 a square feet. So when we looked at the assessment and we said, well, okay, well, we'll take that in consideration. We did project a lot higher than what they reported in 2021 and what they actually reported in 2022. As you see in the previous years, expenses have been going down from 2019 to 2021. Despite that, we did project a little higher. We did correct that in the test to make it more accurate as we see in the history of this property. Now, when looking at the when comparing the original assessment versus the test, we did make the adjustment and add vacant square footage to this property. We went from 8,090 square feet to 10,255 square feet. And I would like to note that in the rent roll, in the 2021 rent roll, the space of about 8,074 square feet was occupied by Summit Ridge Energy, LLC, and that lease was set to expire in 2025. Now, I'm not sure how the appellant achieved their lease square footage 104, 163. They only made a comment and said that it was an error on their part, but maybe some of the Summit space was still occupied at the time. I'm not sure, but there is a discrepancy there between what was shown in the 2021 rent roll and in the 2022 rent roll, where we didn't see a termination fee reported in 2022. We didn't see any termination clause that we asked for with all the terminations that they're reporting in their supporting documents. So with that, we still included the 10,255 square feet as vacant. We do know that as the property stabilizes, we do know that because of our guidelines and our sliding vacancy, that we do know that if this property was stabilized, at a minimum, it would be 5% vacant, which would eliminate about $240,634 from the projected vacancy once stabilized. So in doing so, it would kind of counterbalance what the projected expenses are for this property would be. So I made that comment last week where because if you increase expenses, you have to consider what this property would be as stabilized. Again, if it was stabilized, it would have more income. It had 10,255 square feet of income ingested in or computed into the income of this property to give an overall projected income of 381,896 more than what we stated in our test column. So with that, we do ask the board to confirm this case as a test, and the original assessment is supported by the facts of the case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Any questions from board members? Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, hey, Jordan, what happened? What is the deal on this Summit Ridge Energy?
They left in 2022. They went to another building under the same ownership. So there was no termination fee income. They just moved from one building to the other. That they asked for a termination fee. There was no termination fee. They just moved from one building to another within the same ownership group. So,
Are they paying rent?
not at this property, at the other property. They don't.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? No, Mr. Peralta,
Well,
take a
no,
minute.
wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Lance.
It's slow. I have a question for the department. This, even before COVID, this building has a history of offering concessions to get people in and pay. And oftentimes you include concessions, not always. Sometimes you adjust the rent or you use the guidelines, which is higher than the actual vacancy. Why are there no concessions listed here, given the history?
Well, that looks like in the past years, they front loaded, and especially in 2021, where they front load the expenses, they report the concessions in the 1 year, but it's spread out through the remainder of the term of the lease when we look at it and try to stabilize the property. Given that this property has the net operating income that it has, we did project lower than what the appellant has shown, by about $2 is what they projected, lower than what we have. But given what the NOI and what this property has achieved over the years, we do feel that our rents are in line.
So is that a way of saying that you adjusted the rents downward a bit and used the guideline vacancy, which is actually a bit higher than the actual vacancy? And so
Correct.
that maybe accounts for, I mean, I've seen you do it before. That accounts for not plugging in a
Correct.
concession figure. Thank you. I don't want to give you the answer, but I
County's
thought that's what I was
vacancy.
saying. But they put in a number sometimes in the row.
Okay. All right, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, overall, this property increased from last year to this year of 0.43%. Now, given that we know that leases have an average of 2.5%, 3% year over year in the contract leases, this is a minimal increase from last year. We do see that, in previous years, this property was stabilized at 10,255 square feet vacant. It still represents only an 8% vacancy of this property. The market that we know in Arlington is about 22%. This is, overperforming as far as, vacancy is concerned. We do see that this property is somewhat stabilized with the, 10,244 square feet, but previous years, it was even more stabilized. So we do ask the board to confirm this case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. So they mentioned that rents increase year over year, so do expenses. This property had vacancy increase year over year as well. The big issue is Mr. Maskin hit the nail on the head, is the concessions. Market concessions of 10% were applied to other properties in the county, not this one. That is unequal treatment, and the Supreme Court has ruled that when a discount is given to an assessment for one owner, neighboring owners are entitled to the same discount to the assessment. That's what's happening here. They did not take 10% off the in-place or the vacant office space to account for market concessions as they have on other properties. Thank you.
All right, thank you. System on the board. Okay, I'll start. I mean, I look at this and think, I'm not sure why we're here in this case. When you look at the original assessment, with the county not having the 2022 information, they were pretty dead on for what they came up with. I mean, they're lower than what was reported. And even if you want to break it out, the vacancy and concessions, I mean, they're reporting 300. Oh, well, you can see what they're reporting on data online 10. Those two numbers combined are less than what the county's given them. So I guess I just don't see, like I said, I don't see why we're here. And I think the appellant's projection of the NOI is extremely low compared to how the property has performed and how it specifically performed in 2022 when they were talking about the vacancy that was in the property. So I'm fine with the original assessment. Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, I continue to think that overall the cap rates ought to be adjusted on office. Putting that aside, because that's not going to happen here. I'm fine with the test. I thought it was right on.
Mary, did I
Plus it's slightly
misunderstand?
higher, but.
You like the original better? No? Did I misunderstand you?
Right, well, the original is lower.
Yeah.
By slight amount.
Yeah.
Right, so
But,
we're not gonna.
but you liked it. You said it's right on. You like
Well,
those.
if you look at it, if you look at the numbers and you didn't have column E, and you see what the county came up with an NOI, and then you get column E, well, hello? I'm surprised they even did a test, to be honest with you. But they adjusted other numbers and it comes up and it still supports it. So, I mean, I don't like the test because the test is slightly higher and we're not going to increase it. So to me, the original assessment is more than fair.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about this building over the years. I think it's very attractive for a lot of companies that want to work with State Department because of that kind of core GSA tenant that's in there. And as long as they're there, I think it's always going to be kind of more valuable than some of the other buildings around there. So I'm okay with it too.
So it's been an extensive rehab of the retail just before COVID. And it just made the curb appeal of the building far higher. I never went inside to see what they did in upper floors. I would just, one comment, it's Mary's comment, that in the original, I thought that the rent was too high, but that the operating expenses were also too high. So we come up in the same place.
No one's
I'm okay with.
contrary to it, then I will move to confirm the county at 44,898,600. Second. A second by Mr. Panoranda, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. County's confirmed at 44,898,600. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is RPC 1603902, 1621 North Kent. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes.
Yes, thank you. So 1621 North Kent, this is a 153,000 square foot office building in Roslyn. It was built in 1966 and is currently approved to be redeveloped as part of Site Plan 422. The assessment has valued this property via the income approach as an operating office building. As of the date of value, the property was over 74% vacant. We inspected this property on August 18th and a department hearing was requested and denied. Now, to value this property as an operating office building, I ask that you direct your attention to the appellant's pro forma on page 53 of the appeal, which is page 52 of the PDF. Here, you'll see that the 4-year operating history of the property, the 2022 assessment, the 2023 assessment, and the stabilized potential. Looking at the operating history of this property, 2 items stick out. First, reported NOI has decreased precipitously over the past 4 years and was less than $400,000 in 2022. Second, vacancy has increased significantly each year, going from 51% on January 1, 2020 to over 74% on January 1, 2023. The assessment cap rate over this period that saw NOI decrease by 72% and vacancy increase by 45% has remained exactly the same. Looking at the stabilized potential column, you can see that we imputed occupied office space at the actual average leased rates, less uniform market concessions of 10%, imputed vacant office at the assessments rate, imputed retail income at the average in-place rent, imputed pass-through and parking income at the 2022 actual rates, used a 30% vacancy rate based on the 2019 DREA guidelines for Roslyn. And I know we've mentioned this several times, so I want to share my screen and show just where this came from, this So here's the 2019 office guidelines. You can see I've highlighted Roslyn, 30% vacancy rate applied. Now, that rate was decreased in 2020, right as vacancy began to skyrocket. So the vacancy rate for this property and for most properties, given what's happened in the past 3 years with leasing and vacancy, should go back to the 30% that Drea used as recently as 2019. Next, we imputed operating expenses at $9.60 per square foot. Operating expenses over the past 4 years have averaged $8.54, all while the building has been an average of 62% vacant. If we gross up the expenses to stabilized occupancy, we get to the assessed rate of $9.60 per square foot. Next, the stabilized potential column grew the 2022 cap rate by 200 basis points to address the chronic vacancy at the property and the increased cost of capital. Finally, the stabilized column took below the line deductions at 2 years for lease up and $90 for TIs. This results in a value of just under $7 million using the income approach. Given this, and knowing that this parcel is part of Site Plan 422, its highest and best use is as future redevelopment. If you'd be so kind as to direct your attention to page 55 of the appeal, you'll see a land value analysis that reflects the market value of the site plan as of the date of value. The existing density is imputed at $50.60 per square foot for office land based on the residual land analysis that's provided on page 56 of the appeal. Retail is imputed at the same rate as office, and the apartment density is imputed at the same rate as the assessment. For the additional PDSP density that has not yet been purchased, the site plan analysis adjusts the apartment and hotel density at the same rate as the assessment, and it adjusts the office and retail additional density at 25% to account for the reduced demand for office space in the market as of date of value. You can see the resulting value for the total site plan, including both the approved and the potential density. If we apply this value proportionally to each parcel, we end up with a land value for this parcel of just under $14 million. Since the improvements are less valuable than the land value, they have no contributory value to the parcel. This is an appropriate adjustment given the high vacancy present in the county, the 3 years of negative net absorption the county has experienced, the lack of return to office by employees, lower profitability of office properties, and the overall lack of demand for office space in the market. The demand simply does not exist for a development as proposed by the site plan, and the assessment should be adjusted to account for the reduced demand for office space. Now, looking at the Drea test, we see that their income relies upon a major error. If you take a look at page 6 of the appeal, you'll see Drea's rent roll. If you scan down the per square foot lease rate for office tenants, you'll notice that one of them sticks out to you. Going down the leased office space, you'll see the rents are in the $30 range. They're from $31 at the low end to $38.54 at the high end. And then you see one tenant in the middle who's paying $63.78 per square foot. This tenant, again, listed at nearly $64 per square foot in rent, is actually paying only $35 per square foot. Correcting for this error decreases Drea's average in-place rent by nearly $1.50 per square foot. This also decreases their vacant office rental rate. Next, Drea makes another error on their comments by stating that CoStar has vacant space advertised at $40 per square foot. In reality, CoStar has space advertised at anywhere from $19.50 per square foot to $34. The vacant space is also being advertised for up to 7 years for lease term as well. Now, several times in the comments, Drea mentions that this building has spec suites available. This is not true. We inspected this property in August, and as we saw on the inspection, this space that they're calling spec suites is actually vacant space that was built out for the prior tenant and has yet to be demised or relet. It's not custom built spec suites meant for marketing. It's the prior tenant's build out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carlton for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. This property was inspected with its sister property, 1601 and 1611 North Kent Street. Now, it's unfortunate that we're not hearing those other cases along with this case because they somewhat coincide. The other two buildings are vacant, completely 100% vacant. my only guess of keeping this property occupied is sort of to pay for the utilities and to keep the other buildings afloat as is. Now, this vacancy is somewhat managed induced in a way where they keep saying that this property is undergoing issues with vacancy year over year, but it's to the management's discretion whether they try to lease these spaces or not, in my opinion. Now, the comment that the appellant made that there's an error on my part, there might be an error on the owner's part for reporting that exact rent on this tenant, the Exco Group. Because if you look on page 63 of 96, that's the exact rent that they report. So no issue was made in the discussion of or in the supporting documents of the appellant to suggest that was an error on the rent roll. So I'm using exactly what was provided in the rent roll, and that's the outcome that we have. So in looking at this case, overall, when you're projecting the income of this property, we do so with the other properties the same way, where we're looking at the most current I&E and then looking at the previous years of reportings. Now, it's somewhat misleading to say this is the income that they can receive if they're not, actively pursuing to lease these spaces. So if you project this property and reconstruct the most recent 2022 I&E, that's in column E. There's an error there. It should be 2022, not 2023 operating year. So if you project that forward and use exactly what the appellant uses as far as the rent per square feet, we're using $30 a square feet for the projected income of the vacant space. You see that the overall NOI of the property is much higher than what they're actually reporting, much higher than the past 4 years of what they've been reporting. Now, compare that to our test and compare that to what the pro formas are for the appellant in 2022 and 2023. They're under projecting this property, making it seem that this property can only achieve so much. But again, it's the management's discretion whether they try to actively lease this or not, or keep this somewhat afloat to keep, the lights on and buy time until they're actually willing to, act on this site plan for 22. So in doing so, the county is treating this property just like any other property where if there's excessive vacancy on the property, we would include excess vacancy adjustments below the line. And that's what we did. We're actually using a higher per square foot at $34 a square foot. As Mr. Harmon pointed out, that's the projected asking rents that they were asking for this property. Now, given that we are slightly higher than what the appellant has projected at $34 versus their $30, we are discounting that rent just to go through our test. If you look at the actual discount on page 5, you'll see exactly what I'm stating here is we're reducing those rents even more by 1.289336 as a vacancy adjustment. And then we're imputing a $9 per square foot expenses. Again, in the past, you see that the average is in line with what we initially reported at $9.75. And then in the test, it's slightly lower at $9 due to projections that they incurred in 2022. Now, the original assessment is in line with what we had as the test. And we do feel that given the lower rents that we do see in the original assessment versus the test, because granted the leases in place did increase in the rent per square foot. So we did make that adjustment in the test, but we are asking the board to confirm the original assessment. Given all the points that I brought up, and we're open to question. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Okay, questions from board members, and Mr. Peralta, I just want to clarify something that you just said. You
Yes.
said that you're treating this property just like every other property in the county that has excess vacancy, whether this is management imposed or not.
Correct.
Okay, but unlike every other property in the county, am I correct in assuming there's a site plan on this building?
There is,
There's a phase development plan for this particular
Right.
property. What Mr. Peralta was saying as far as the vacancy, we are just treating the fact that they
Or
are
no,
still.
okay, no, I got that point. I just want to know, is there a site plan on this property?
There's a phase
Phase
development
site
site plan for this property.
That different. than-
Okay, so why
I'll
is
explain it.
the general policy of the county has been, if there's a site plan on the property, we assess it on the site plan value. So why aren't we hearing anything?
Should allocate.
Okay,
Okay.
I think it needs to be on the record from the county.
Yeah, yeah.
Why is it not being assessed on the site plan?
because it's a phase development site plan. Right now, it's still operating as an office building. And as the phases come through where they're arranging for different density and stuff like that, we do make the changes as it occurs.
Additionally, if the board will look at page 9 of the packet, it also includes the phase development land sheet, which shows the allocations based on the parcels and the density for this particular phase development. So that is part of, that should have been brought up in the case, and we do apologize for that. But there is, the land itself is based off of that phase development. We are recognizing that there's still income attributed to this property. And so that is what Mr. Peralta was speaking to. But we do, this property, in addition to several others, which will be heard before the board, are a part of this phase development site plan, this approved phase development site plan.
Okay, well, bear with me a second because I'm having trouble navigating to that screen.
So it's page 9, it's right after the worksheet.
And so what is the land value for this building if it was assessed on the site plan?
It is
What's the
the
site
current,
plan value? If it was,
It's the same.
Their
It is-
value is $18,877,200 for this parcel on the site.
if you would look at the bottom of that page 9, there's a list of RPCs. This RPC is 163936, I believe, for Roslyn Plaza E. And if you go across, it does show that land value that Mr. Harmon just mentioned for
What's it?
18,000.
I'm between trying to talk with you and flip through. Can you just tell me what?
Can
the
I
number-
share it? Can I share it on my screen and then talk you through it, or just,
Sure.
we go, that, share it.
okay, hold on one second.
PR 036.
Let me know if you can see anything on the screen.
Yeah, I can't see that far away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Is it right here? Okay, so.
So these are the RPCs. I don't know if you still can, if you can see the screen now, but these are the RPCs that are part of that phase development site plan. And the land value for each of these are calculated here. So this particular parcel is valued at 18,877,200.
No, that includes actually a 60% discount on the land. If you see the calculations above that, if you don't mind.
And that's just
Sure.
on the additional density that has not been purchased, the discount, to clarify.
You'll see the calculation there. When we value the land density, we do discount that land 60%.
Or the additional land that had not
Okay,
been
so back to
purchased.
the, okay, thank you. Back to the county. So I guess in all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen the difference between a site plan and a phase site plan where.
Well-
It just seems like we've always said, it's got a site plan on it, it's gonna be assessed at that. But it seems like now it's kind of like you have your cake and you want to eat it too. That
Well,
it's
there,
higher on an income, so we're gonna do this as an income. I've never seen this in 15 years. I've never heard anyone, in fact, I didn't hear any testimony from the county that we're not even looking at it this way. So I'm a little confused why this is kind of on the back burner here.
Well,
Well,
the appellant's not disputing that there shouldn't be income on this property.
I'm not
as well.
asking what the appellant is saying. I'm saying why, if there's a site plan, we aren't looking at the site plan.
We did
Okay,
appeal
Being
at the site
uniform
plan.
with everybody else.
So if I could just speak before Mr. Peralta and Mr. Harmon jump in. This really should have been presented first, based on the phase development site plan to discuss the fact that the county is factoring in other additional parcels that were approved in that phase development. The difference between a current active site plan is that they're able to move, it's actionable now. They're approved of a certain date. They have to have the work done by a certain time. Phase development tends to take a little bit longer. There's more parcels involved. It's similar to Potomac Yard and some of these larger projects, which go through a number of kind of reorganizations of parcels before they actually start the work. So what we're recognizing here is the time that's involved for these parcels, for these properties, for this particular development to actually come to fruition. It does have a timeline for it, but it's different from the active site plans that we value. So when we say phases, it could be 5 or 6 different phases for this one. So we treat them a little bit differently by discounting the land. In this case, we're discounting it by 60%. So we should have discussed that. And again, this should have been heard with the other, I think 3 other cases that are going to be heard before the board, because they all have very similar natures with the land value itself. This particular property, though, has income attributed to it. And it's not the first case that we've seen, but it may be the first case that the board has seen, where we are recognizing that they're still operating on this particular property. Therefore, we're valuing the land piece of it, and then also accounting for the income that building is attributed to that property.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chairwoman, if I may address
Hold on,
that.
We're
So
still in questions. No,
Okay.
hold on. Mr. Yates.
Did I hear that, Jordan, that you don't control all this property yet in this site plan?
they
Certainly.
it is a common owner, Mr. Yates.
Okay.
So they do control it. They don't own all the density. So we heard the county say multiple times that they discounted the land.
Okay,
They
okay,
only
asked
discounted
and
the
answered. Thank
portion
you.
that they don't own.
Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, let me ask you that chart that we just saw, was that done in the site plan or is that done by your office?
So the chart is Drea's
It's-
chart, and we've
It's
provided
done
an updated
by
one.
our office.
So that the
We've
phase
provided an
development
updated
site
one.
plan
Okay, who are
did
you
not,
asking the question to?
well, whoever can answer, the phase development site plan did not allocate the density to the parcels. You all took the overall and then distributed it out in a pro rata basis based on the area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Second, when you say purchase the density, purchase from who?
So as of the date of value, there was existing density approval for 744,000 square feet of office density and 196 apartments. The full phase development site plan has additional density that has not been purchased. And Eileen, if you could jump in. I believe
What do you mean by purchase?
Mr. Lawson, I'll answer that question. So the phase development site plan allows the owner to pay the county for the value of that FAR if they choose to use it. The owner does not currently own the density that the county is assessing with
Okay, I got
the
it.
discount. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. I can explain this.
Okay, other questions? Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, again, we're looking at this property as a phase development site plan. We do discount the land based on the overall density of the property. We did discount it 60% based on the chart that you see. When looking at this property as an income producing property, we did look at the income that was reported historically. We do project going forward in 2022, the INE has projected income, well, did not project income for the vacant space. We did that on the reconstruction in E1. We do ask that the original assessment is confirmed based on the information that we had. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So to summarize our position, we did appeal based on the site plan value. What we did with the income approach that we provided was show that the value as an operating office building is below the value as a redevelopment site. That's why that pro forma page is in there. It gets to a value of $7 million. The appealed value was $14 million based on the potential redevelopment. Now, we provided our own site plan analysis on page 55 of the appeal. You can see that the county has not discounted the actual density that was in place as of the first of the year. So when they say that, that's not the case. They're discounting the potential density that had not been purchased as of the first of the year. So this analysis of ours on page 55 of the appeal does make an adjustment to lower the rates of office potential density based on reduced demand for office space in the market as of the first of the year. This site has over 1.75 million square feet of potential office. That's not as valuable on January 1, 2023 due to reduced demand and increased cost as it may have been in prior years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's just among the board. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, let me explain what's going on here, best I can understand it. Pentagon City is a phase development site plan that my dad did, gosh, 30 years ago. And what it does is it says, okay, this area of land, we're going to give this amount of density, office, hotel, residential, but it's not allocated. It's just this whole area gets this. And it's not until you come in with your 4.1 final site plan that the property rights or the land use rights are established for the individual parcel. And so I don't think the phase development site plan has any relevance because unless and until they do the 4.1, it's just out there and it's not available to anybody until, and they use the term purchase. I think what they meant is the county's expecting affordable housing contributions, undergrounding, and a whole series of things of that nature. And so to me, we just look at this based on income.
Okay, Mr. Yates.
Barnes?
Yeah.
So I want to come in and buy this piece.
Right.
I'm not, site plan has no impact.
Well, you would
What-
probably, if it's this one, this specific
Yeah.
They won't sell it to you.
Yeah, they,
Not at that number.
one.
well, yeah, I mean, you were looking at an 18 and we're looking at
You want to keep the building or redevelop? If you want to redevelop, it's contingent upon
Have
a
it.
4.1
The bigger
site
picture.
plan.
yeah. So the bigger picture really can't be done at this point. If someone, to set a value on this building,
Pentagon City, there is still unused density from when my dad's owned it. And that's like 40 years ago.
So then we're in agreement that the site plan doesn't have relevance to this assessment.
Well, I can speak to the office.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead.
because I actually was talking to somebody who had owned a business and looked at this property a while ago. Liked it, wanted to move in. The issue is there's a 6-month demo clause in all places.
Yeah,
So if you're gonna move your whole life and move your business over there, you gotta be ready to uproot and leave within 6 months of notice. And that's gonna be 6 months of notice, you better be out of there. So as an existing property, that definitely hinders it. That's kind of like landlord's decision. That's not necessarily just the market. So, you have to take into account that that's the ground. It's fantastic real estate. You have an office building there that's generating, 1.8 million in NOI after taxes, almost $1.5 million or $1.25 million. It's a covered land play. Long term, I think it's great ground. I don't think the owner would even consider selling it for $21 million. I think the number would be a lot higher if they put it to market. So I'm okay with the
no,
assessment.
but only as an assembly.
It's,
I mean, it's worth $1.50 on its own.
Right.
It's worth a lot with the,
Yeah.
from
Right.
It's-
Wilson and
it's speculative, unfortunately. We know there's additional value, but it's very speculative.
It's just, it's waterfront property in Roslyn.
Yeah.
right? It's like, give me an office building for $138 a square foot, and I can figure it out over time.
It had more occupancy, but in 2020, it had a value of 27 million. They brought that value down, and your 6 months clause helps explain that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They don't want to
It's worth a lot
encumber the
more than
building
the
to do a lease or something.
There's been a kickout clause there at least a dozen years. Used to be 16 months, 20 months, got down to 14, 12, now it's down to 6. Because they're getting closer to
Yeah, getting
finally
closer.
pulling the trigger. But, so,
No, that's very helpful.
so my take on that is, I agree with everything you said. But I think that at best, the valuation should be flat. Because it's deteriorating. Maybe the counter is, well, but the owners decided to deteriorate. The retail's gone, the buildings next door gone, vacant. You know, it's, as you know, it's combined retail on the first floor, and the parking lots are wrecked, they're not fixing stuff, and it all makes sense. And so I can't imagine that the value should go up in a deteriorating wasteland. That's a little
Right,
extreme,
but the
but
value
property.
itself is
But you might, that's right, I mean, you could revert to the land, land's on site plan, but I understand Barnes, and I mean, let's just avoid that and go along the department's rationale, makes sense.
How is it?
But your counter might be, but the reason it's deteriorating is because the management, the property owner, is doing stuff, and they're doing intelligent, reasonable stuff, and they're letting it go, and it should be rewarded for today for long-term riches. So if you stop, and I'll just.
How is it
You
fixed?
agree
Good
with
with
this
it.
now?
You're good with it.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'm motion to confirm the county's assessment, 21,140,000.
Okay, I'll second, all in favor?
That was your answer.
Opposed? Think good about.
Oh, no, I'm good.
It's unanimous. County is confirmed at 21,114,200.
Twenty-seven.
Okay,
Is it 27?
poorly presented, but. we'll move right on.
Years ago.
All right, so the RPC next
Years ago.
is, excuse me, gentlemen. RPC 170130015 at 200 14th Street North. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. 2014th Street North. This is a 115,000 square foot office building. It's located at 14th and Taft and Courthouse. It was built in 1987 and was 44% vacant as of the date of value. It is 62% vacant as of today. Again, a departmental hearing was not allowed. Here again, I want to request that you turn your attention to page 48 of the appeal, where you'll see the appellant's pro forma page with 4-year operating history, the 2022 assessment, the 2023 assessment, and the stabilized potential of the property. Looking at this page, we see a familiar theme: NOI decreasing year after year after year, and vacancy increasing year after year after year. NOI decreased by 25% from 2019 to 2022 and was below $1.3 million in 2022. The assessment imputes NOI at just under $2.1 million. Vacancy increased by 22% from 2019 to 2022 to over 44% vacant as of January 1 and over 62% vacant as of today. As of the date of value, this property had less occupancy than 4601 Fairfax Drive, which sold recently for $104 per square foot and was 62% occupied at the time of sale, with GSA as the main tenant. The assessment values this property at more than double the amount of 4601 Fairfax's sale price, coming in at $209 per square foot. Now, looking at the stabilized potential column on page 48 of the appeal, we see that the total potential rental income imputed is above the assessment. The pass-through, parking, and other income is imputed at the actual 2022 rates. Vacancy and collection loss is imputed at 30% based on the 2019 DREA guidelines that I showed you in the last case. These were reduced in 2020, just as vacancy began to rapidly increase in the county. Given what we've experienced over the past 3 years, the guidelines need to go back to using that 30% vacancy rate. Operating expenses are imputed at $11 per square foot based on growing the 2022 actual expenses by 4% to account for inflation. Here, I want to make a note that we did remove over $1 million in legal fees from the 2022 I&E reported operating expenses. This value was related to litigation over a tenant who never took occupancy. So we took that out of the operating expenses. The 2022 cap rate is increased by 200 basis points to account for the county experiencing 3 consecutive years with negative absorption, overall vacancy being up, space available for sublease being up. Any new leases were for less space, lower rent, shorter terms, and required higher concessions. Put simply, the office market in Arlington County was far more risky and much less profitable as of the date of value than it has been in many years. Yet the assessment's cap rate implies that the January 1, 2023 market is stronger than the 2017 market and is exactly the same as the 2018 through 2022 markets. We all know this is not the case, and a potential purchaser would not impute the same cap rate as the assessment has for this property. Now, that's just the market demand side of the equation. We also have to look at capital markets as of the date of value. The cost of capital was much more costly and lending standards were much tighter than in prior years. But the assessment again makes no adjustment for this massive change in the market. It was widely anticipated at the beginning of 2022 that the Federal Reserve would raise interest rates. And in fact, the Fed did begin aggressively raising interest rates beginning in mid-March of 2022. Overall, the Fed raised interest rates 7 different times throughout 2022 for an overall increase of 425 basis points. This increase was matched point for point by the SOFR. An increase in interest rates of this magnitude does affect commercial property values. We know this, and any potential purchaser would know this. Peter Rothman, the co-head of strategic research at Green Street, stated that higher yields on treasury bonds equals higher cap rates. Steve Gilbert, Director of Applied Modeling and Analytics for JP Morgan Investment Banking, stated that cap rate levels are generally a reflection of other larger economic factors, including rapidly rising interest rates and neighborhood supply-demand balance. So we know increased interest rates do affect cap rates by increasing the cost of capital, which necessitates a higher required return. Now the question is, how much is the cap rate affected? It's not a 1-for-1 increase, and as you can see, we've provided support for only a 200 basis point increase to the cap rate. We've provided an article with the appeal that states the 10-year Treasury bond is a useful barometer for cap rates, where a spread is added to the 10-year T-bill rate to arrive at the cap rate. Looking at this, the 10-year Treasury increased by 236 basis points over the course of 2022. Historically, DREA has made adjustments when interest rates fluctuated significantly, as they did last year. Most recently, in 2009, the 10-year T-bill increased by 160 basis points. DREA responded the following year by increasing cap rates by 175 basis points. This time around, the 10-year T-bill increased by a greater amount, 236 basis points, yet there was no change to the cap rate. Over the past 15 assessment years, excluding 2023, the spread between the 10-year T-bill and the DREA cap rate has averaged 345 basis points. For 2023, the spread is 152 basis points, which is less than half the historical average. This is especially egregious given the turmoil the market experienced over the course of 2022. Additionally, sales from the Peter Korpak's report, the county's commissioned expert, support higher cap rates than what DREA has assumed. Korpak's concluded based on Arlington sales at January 1, 2023 cap rates were at an average of 8.5%. It's important to remember that these sales Korpak's looked at are some of the best properties in the county, with an average occupancy of 95% and a remaining WALT of over 7 years. So the final value on that stabilized potential column is $112 per square foot. This is nearly an 8% premium to the price paid for the better tenanted building down the road with GSA as a primary tenant at 4601 Fairfax that sold recently for $104 per square foot. Now, finally, I want to address the DREA comments and the rent roll. The DREA test uses escalated rents, not January 1, 2023 rents in place. An example of this is a rental rate imputed for the Alliance Group. That rental rate they've used doesn't actually take effect until May of 2024. So that January 1, that's not the rate as of January 1. Next, comment 4 on the DREA test page states that the appellant included BOMA adjustments as vacant space and imputed operating expenses on this space as well. This is simply not true. Had a departmental hearing been held, we could have addressed this, but it was not. What they assume is BOMA adjustments is actually space known to be vacating at the end of January of this year. This space, the tenant was leaving at the end of January again, and this was counted as vacant, just as any potential purchaser as of the date of value would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. For this case, the original assessment, we did overshoot the amount of vacant square feet that was reported as vacant. If you compare our column D to column F, we did make adjustments from 61,060 square feet to what is reported at 54,414 square feet vacant. I'm not sure where the appellant is coming up with 63,434, but I believe that's where my comment came from, where they're including that in their calculation there. The county does not impute an income for that BOMA space. So if you turn to page 6, there's no income associated with that BOMA space. Now, if Mr. Harmon believes that it's vacant space, then there should be income attributable to that. On the other side as well, if you pay attention to the amount of expenses correlated with that BOMA space, you'll see that they're imputing an expense for that space of $12 per square foot. So that income in that expenses is somewhat inflated because they're imputing about $81,888 associated with that BOMA space. So whereas the county does not impute any expenses on the space, nor does it impute any income on that space. So just to clarify that. So again, if we go back to the overall data points for this case, you'll see that the county had the original assessment at actually a lower per square foot for the income compared to what we see in the test and compared to what the appellant is projecting in the pro forma. We're originally at $40.50 in the test based on the I&E that we show that was shown. We're at $42.60, and then the appellant's projecting $43.98 for the projected income, higher than our test, higher than our original assessment. So when we're looking at the comparison of our original assessment and our test, we do see that the income is somewhat in line with what we originally had. Now, given that we reconstructed the income, you'll see that the original 2022 I&E, as well as the previous 3 years, does not report any income for the vacant space. So it's a little misleading, and there's a huge distinction on what they're reporting versus what a property can actually project as far as the income is concerned, and as far as the apartment's job is to project this property and attribute a per square foot rent for all spaces, not just actual lease spaces. So there's a huge disparity between what they're reporting, what we're asking for. And so when you look at these cases, you'll see that because we're reconstructing the I&Es, it's a better indication of what the property should receive as far as income is concerned. And so the bottom line, when you look at row 19 NOI, you'll see that they're projecting in 2022 that they would only receive $389,848. And with the added income, there's a figure much larger than that. Again, the original assessment and the test does capture exactly what the property should achieve, should it impute the income of the vacant space. Now, again, I'd like to reiterate that we did project higher as far as the expenses. We went from $11 to $11.50 in the test. And I did note earlier that the appellant is projecting a higher expense number because they're equating the BOMA square footage as expensed, like, you know, they were treating that as vacant space, as he noted. But we didn't include that as income, and we didn't include it for the expenses. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing? I'm sorry to interrupt. If when you're looking at columns A, B, and C, these are unadjusted numbers. So these numbers do not include that vacant office amount. So those NOIs are lower than what they appear lower than what they actually are. So I just want that to be recognized in your deliberation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzger.
I'll start off with the easy one. On columns A, B, and C, is B supposed to be the year 2020 and C the year 2021? Just a little admin error.
Correct. B is 2021. I mean 2020, and C is 2021.
That's great. Okay, I just want to make sure. For the appellant on those columns, A, B, and C, as well as E, your actuals, are retail rent income included in that top line row one called office?
It is, yes.
It is. Okay, great. And then the department, of course, then ferreted it out after the fact. Okay, great. And that's what I have for now. Thank you.
Mr. Yates?
To the county, it's minor. Why the TIs at $70? Did you initially?
Yes.
Let me see.
Its
I don't think-
guidelines are clearly different.
Yeah, I don't think it. Yeah, I think that was initially a mistake there. It should have been 90, correct?
Okay,
I believe it used last year's value instead of the adjusted value for 2023.
so that's at least an error. All right.
Let me just double check to make sure that we didn't impute it there. Yeah, it was $70.
Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, this is for Jordan. Jordan, I've read this a number of times. It's saying the guidelines place a cap on the vacancy rate used to value office properties at 25%. This is vacancy is contrary to recent assessment methodology. Are you talking about the county years ago used to put it at 30? Is that the point?
That's correct, yes, sir. Up until 2020, they imputed it at 30%. In 2020, they changed it from 30% to 25%.
Okay.
Any other? No? Okay. Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up this.
Yes, thank you. Just going off the comment that Mr. Harmon made about the legal adjustment on 2022's INE, if you were to extract out the $1,099,474, the per square foot expenses for that calendar year will be $9.89. So if you compare that to what they previously have shown in the previous years, 2019, 2020, and 2021, they're reporting much lower than they have. So the county at $11 is reasonable. We even went a step further at $11.50 in the test. And so with that, we do ask that the board confirm the assessment based on the NOIs that are been reported. And when you gross up to make the income what it should be with the vacant space, the county is in line with that in the original and in the test. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. That's, we've heard a lot of subterfuge from the DREA with regards to BOMA and what is legally required to be reported versus what they want the owners to report. This is all missing the point. This property, the important matter is NOI at the property has averaged $1.59 million over the past 4 years. NOI was $1.29 million in 2022. The assessment is at $2.1 million. Vacancy increased over 2022, was known to be increasing at the beginning of 2023, yet the assessment is projecting NOI to increase 63% year over year. This property, again, has been at 1.6 million over the past 4 years, was at 1.3 million last year. Assessments projecting a 63% increase. In today's market, the market as of the date of value, that is not realistic. Thank you.
Increased.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. Mr. Metzger.
Yeah, I got my hackles up. Those NOIs that the appellant mentions doesn't include a potential vacancy, income for offices road 2. It does include retail and what they call office, the appellant. If you add up what the department calls office and retail, it comes out, it's pretty close, you know, but there's no that potential. The second thing, the NOIs do count, and after all said and done, given the caveat of no potential office, vacant office income, and they are pretty consistent. The only thing, therefore, I find, and this is a nit for sure, but it's real, it's a number. If we're looking at a lower number, if we're looking at a lower number, the original assessment, it ought to be increased by the $21,000 of $20 of TI per vacant square foot. And therefore lowered by that $21,000. This is column D. Was that clear? You understand that? Because they made an administrative error, it happens. And if they had caught it, the original would have been $21,000 less. That's very simple, if that's what we're going with.
Yeah, I don't know if this even matters much, but this is right across from the courthouse
Yeah,
where the law, and there's no lawyers. There's not a single lawyer in this
it's
building.
astonishing.
Used to be
It's doing so
skinny,
poorly.
you know.
Kenny was in there.
Yeah.
They all got their own buildings.
They've all,
Yeah.
I think they've all gone to Wilson Boulevard or something. It's
And,
really-
and it seems like they all went to the other side of the government center. That's where all the law, and I don't know why, it's weird.
It's a perfectly nice building.
Yeah, it is.
It's located weird, don't you think?
Well, yeah, kind of a dead end to me.
I mean, it's like kind of over
Yeah.
there.
Still not. It's still accessible. It's still.
Of course it is.
You know, I continue to think the cap rate ought to be adjusted, but given that it's not going to be, I think the county's figures are accurate.
What do you call them? Original or test?
I think just about the
Yeah,
same.
it's
Yeah.
kind of-
Yeah,
But there's different,
went back to the original.
You go back.
Yeah.
Everybody's.
Yeah.
what about that $21,000
No.
deduction?
Yeah, I started to do that. $640,000.
Yeah, and it's below the line. It's very simple. There's no cap, there's no anything. You know?
No, it's 640,000. But my concern with that is, in knowing that, we know more information. I can see, and it's adjusted for in column F, which is higher. No. Yeah, which is slightly higher. So my feeling is the original assessment, even with the error, is lower than what it would be corrected to.
I understand, but it would be just those few dollars even lower. You know, just it's an admin error, you know, it happens. And it would have come out that much less, and we would have been comparing everything exactly the same, all the rationales, except in column D, the number would have been just that much lower, and we would have selected it.
I'm fine with the original.
I agree with that point that I think, you know, if we had considered the $90 to begin with, we would be looking at the lower
We would
number.
have accepted it, we would have accepted it, just a lower number.
Confirm D, knowing there's an error.
That says what?
I don't think it's right if just confirming D.
What's the revised number?
It's
25,847,000.
740.
227,450? Okay. We'll go with that.
I just can't say B, confirm it, knowing there's an error.
Yeah, it's not an error of judgment.
Yeah.
600,000.
A $600,000 difference. Wait a minute. Where did that number come from?
I just did
I
Just
did
I
the,
heard 25,227.
640, 670.
Yeah,
the difference between $70 and $90.
below the line.
on TI.
Yeah.
But aren't we multiplying? Let's make sure we get this right. We don't make an admin error.
Well, we just have 4 people who did it.
32,000 square feet.
Yeah, times $20. Oh, okay, yes, got it. Fine. Got it. I know what I did. I did it wrong. So it is consequential. I feel better. Thank you.
It's fine.
Okay, so since it's your option, are you motioning this?
Sure, I don't have the final number though, but I move, and Jose is gonna give me the number to lower the assessment to 25 million. Go ahead.
25,227 or 500. 25,227,500.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Yates, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. The assessment's reduced to 25,227,500 based on the original assessment, correcting the TI from $70 to $90 a square foot. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Completes the agenda. Anybody have any other business?
Yeah, maybe I'm out of line saying this, but,
Something that you want to say on the record?
well, I think the county, what I was going to say is I think the county ought to give these folks their due. You know, it's been brought up time after time.
Okay.
I went and looked at the county's website and it says if you ask for a meeting, they'll give you one. It's,
And it went against the county the one time that they did not have a meeting.
and if they go to court and they say, well, they wouldn't give us. I
All
think
right,
it's gonna
Derek,
hurt
have
the
you heard
county.
that?
Yeah, it's not that we're not providing a meeting. We're always available for information sent and received. Anytime they want to reach out and have discussion with us, we're always, make sure that our staff is always available for that. Just given the time constraints and the information being brought up in the meetings, the, formal meetings that were being scheduled and held, we had to make a decision to, move to a different format of processing information received, keeping open lines of communication. It's not that we're denying communication in any way. We just couldn't go to our formal standard process of setting up meetings, scheduling that in our schedule. We didn't have time for that given the caseload.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we're certainly open, to any information sent, received from Mr. Harmon or any agent. And our communication lines are always open and we're always available. So.
All right.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And
So,
we will
and-
stand adjourned at 10:43, reconvene next Tuesday, which will be virtual for the board members, 9:26 at 9 a.m. Thank you.
We should still have a meeting.